I was sitting quietly at the table next to my 6-year-old grandson at my son's second wedding. Suddenly, the boy squeezed my hand tightly and whispered to me, "Grandpa, I want to leave right now." I asked him, "What's wrong?" Trembling, he replied, "Grandpa, you didn't look under the table, did you?" Slowly, I looked down and froze. I took my grandson's hand, and we stood up in silence. "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please give it a like, subscribe to Revenge with Thomas, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it's reached." I was sitting in the middle of the wedding hall, glowing with candlelight, right next to my grandson. I saw my little boy, whom I love more than my own life. Today was the wedding of Andrew, my son, to Victoria, his second wife. Ethan was very entertained, pushing his red toy car back and forth on the white immaculate tablecloth. His clear eyes seemed immersed in a world of his own, where the noise of the adults around him didn't exist. I looked at him, and my heart softened. Carefully, I adjusted the tiny tie on his shirt collar, a gesture as gentle as if I were caressing the memories of his mother, Emily, whose tender smiles I still remember as if it were yesterday. The soft music of the jazz band filled the place, mixing with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of wine glasses. The hall was decorated with impressive luxury, with arrangements of white and pure roses on each table, and the candlelight reflected on the gleaming silver plates. I looked up, searching for Andrew. He was busy going from table to table, toasting to thank the guests with a radiant smile that seemed to want to hide the emptiness I knew he still carried in his heart. Since Emily went far away, Victoria, my son's new wife, dazzling in her wedding dress embroidered with sparkling beads, posed for photos with her friends. Her smile was perfect, without a single cloud, as if the whole world belonged to her. I looked at her and felt something strange in my chest, a strange sensation, but I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was just being too sensitive. The waiters moved with agility between tables, serving more wine, removing empty plates, and arranging napkins. An elderly couple sitting at our table turned to me with a kind smile. "How fast Ethan is growing. How old is he now?" "Joseph." I smiled and responded with a soft voice. "He just turned 6. Time flies." Then I turned to cut a piece of cake and give it to Ethan. The boy looked up. His eyes shone with gratitude. But immediately he lowered his head again and continued pushing his little car, as if only that toy was the place where he felt safe. Suddenly, Ethan stopped. His little hands stopped pushing the car, and his round eyes looked at me with a seriousness that wasn't normal for him. I was startled a bit. A bad feeling ran through my body. He grabbed my hand tightly. His little fingers were ice cold. With an urgent voice, he whispered, "Grandpa, I want to leave right now." His voice trembled as if he were containing a fear he couldn't explain. My heart raced. I leaned toward him and put a hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong, my boy? Tell me what you have." He shuddered, pressing his lips, and then whispered so quietly that I had to bring my ear close to hear him. "Grandpa, you haven't seen under the table, have you?" His words were like a cold knife that pierced my chest. A terrible anguish began to grow inside me, making it hard to breathe. I tried to stay calm and stroked his hair, but his gaze, the gaze of a child barely 8 years old, full of panic, prevented me from ignoring it. "It's okay, my love. Let your grandpa see," I told him, trying to make my voice sound calm to calm him, although I myself felt my heart racing. Carefully, I lifted the edge of the white tablecloth and looked at the dark space under the table where the wooden legs of the chairs and Ethan's little shoes swinging could be seen. And then I saw it. A little paper folded in four, thrown there, right next to Ethan's chair. It was so small it almost got lost in the darkness, but its presence froze my blood. Ethan snuggled against me, his little hand gripping my arm as if seeking refuge. I felt his agitated breathing. Each tremor seemed to tell me that something was very wrong. I bent down completely, and with a trembling hand picked up the paper. The people around us continued laughing and toasting. But in that instant, my whole world shrank until there was only me, Ethan, and that damn paper in my hand. I unfolded it. The dim light of the candle on the table was enough to read the scribbled words. Table 5, add shrimp to the boys' portion. A few words, but they were like a punch directly to the heart. I felt the blood freeze in my veins, and the air got stuck in my chest. Ethan is allergic to shrimp, something my whole family knows perfectly. A single piece of shrimp would be enough to put him in mortal danger. Who could have written this? Who could be so cruel right on my son's wedding day? I squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling his little fingers tremble inside mine. I stood up suddenly, not caring about the surprised looks from people. The elderly couple nearby stopped talking and looked at me with concern. I hugged Ethan with all my strength, as if I feared that if I let him go, he would vanish. The laughter and music continued playing, but for me, everything had become a heavy, suffocating silence. Memories of other times invaded me, taking me out of that resplendent wedding hall to take me back to the years when our family was complete. I once thought my son's home would always be full of laughter, but life, like a sudden wind, extinguished that flame of happiness, leaving me with scars that would never heal. I remember Emily, my first daughter-in-law, like I remember the morning sunlight filtering through the window at dawn. Her smile was tender and warm. She always made me feel like I was in the arms of a true daughter. Emily never raised her voice, never did anything that worried me. She was one of those people who just by looking at them made you feel at peace. I still remember those very windy afternoons on the outskirts of Boston when I arrived at Andrew and Emily's little house. Ethan's laughter, who was just learning to walk, echoed in the backyard while he chased after a colorful rubber ball. Emily used to be on the porch with a basket of freshly cut vegetables, smiling while watching her son. Dad Joseph, try the chili I prepared. Let's see what you think, she often told me with a voice full of pride as she put the hot bowl in front of me. I would sit there eating and chatting with her about simple things, while Ethan crawled on the floor clutching an old toy car. But the most beautiful and also the most painful memory is the night Ethan got very sick. He had a very high fever. His little body was burning, and his eyes barely opened without strength even to cry. Emily held him while tears silently rolled down her cheeks. Dad Joseph, I'm very scared, she whispered with a trembling voice. I sat next to her, taking turns putting wet cloths on his forehead, trying to calm her. Don't worry, daughter. The boy is strong. He's going to be okay. But inside, worry weighed on me like a stone. I stayed awake with Emily until dawn, when the first rays of sun appeared, and Ethan finally lowered his fever and fell asleep in his mother's arms. Emily turned to look at me with red eyes, but with a weak smile. Thank you, Dad. Without you, I don't know what I would have done. At that moment, I just took her hand and squeezed it tight, as if wanting to tell her I would always be there for her and Ethan. I thought that small family would be happy forever, like a song that never ends. But then, one fateful afternoon, everything collapsed. The phone rang while I was washing dishes in the kitchen. The cold voice of a police officer was heard on the other end of the line. "Mr. Joseph, we regret to inform you that there was an accident." I don't remember how I finished hearing the sentence. I only know that my hands trembled so much that I dropped a plate on the floor, and it shattered. Emily had gone in an instant when a truck that lost control crashed into her car on the highway outside the city. I stood there paralyzed, feeling how the world crumbled before me. Emily's funeral was on a day of torrential rain. The drops fell without stopping, as if the sky also cried for her. Ethan, who at that time was only 5 years old, was in my arms, confused, looking at everyone with his innocent eyes, without understanding what was happening. "Grandpa, where's my mommy?" he asked me with his little voice. I hugged him tightly, swallowing my tears, and whispered to him, "Your mommy is in a very beautiful place, my love." But inside, I felt destroyed. Andrew, my son, collapsed in front of the coffin. His shoulders trembled, and he couldn't say a word. I knew he was trying to be strong, but his gaze was empty, as if a part of his soul had gone with Emily. After that tragedy, Andrew changed completely. He buried himself in work. He left home very early and didn't return until Ethan was already asleep. I understood he was running away, trying to fill that immense void in his heart with endless days of work. But Ethan, my poor boy, was the one who suffered the most. He began to talk less. His gaze was often sad, as if he were waiting for a miracle that would bring his mother back. I became his only support. I took him to school every morning and sat next to his bed every night to tuck him in. "Grandpa, tell me a story about my mommy," he often asked me, and I told them with a broken voice, talking about the times Emily sang him to sleep, how she cut fruit into little pieces to make him the dessert he loved so much. Each story was an attempt to keep Emily's image alive in Ethan's mind, and also in my heart. Olivia, my adoptive daughter, also became an essential part in those days. She, with her warm heart and skillful hands, often came to the house bringing coloring books or cookies she baked herself. Olivia loved Ethan as if he were her little brother. She carried him, taught him to read, or sat for hours with him at the table to help him make his clumsy drawings. "Look, Ethan, your house turned out prettier than mine," she said, laughing with her voice clear as little bells. But sometimes I caught Olivia looking at Andrew when he entered the house in silence after a long day of work. It was a deep look that contained something more than simple sibling affection. I saw it, but decided not to say anything. Maybe I was afraid that if I touched on that topic, I would break the fragile stability of what remained of our family. Andrew's house gradually became without laughter, but thanks to Olivia and Ethan, the flame of the family continued burning, albeit dimly. I did everything possible so that flame wouldn't go out. But deep in my heart, I knew that both Andrew and I lived with wounds that had never healed. Every time I saw Ethan sleep, I saw Emily's features in his little face, and my heart hurt again. The memory of that afternoon remains as clear in my mind, as if time hadn't passed. I was sitting in my small living room, listening to the sparrows singing in the yard, with my heart full of mixed feelings. It was the first time Andrew, my son, brought Victoria home to introduce her. I tried to open my heart. I tried to see that girl with the eyes of a father who wants his son to find happiness again after so much pain. But deep down, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease, like a cold wind that made me tremble. That afternoon, Andrew arrived later than normal. I was in the kitchen preparing the burgers that Ethan loves so much when I heard the door open. Andrew entered with a strange glow on his face, his eyes illuminated like in his youth years when he talked to me about Emily, with a passion he couldn't hide. "Dad," he said with a broken voice, leaning on the doorframe, "I want you to meet someone." I left what I was doing and looked at him, feeling a bit of nervousness. "Someone special?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Andrew smiled, a smile I hadn't seen from him in a long time. "Yes, you're going to like her a lot," he said, full of confidence. I nodded. I wiped my hands on the apron, trying to hide the worry that was beginning to grow in me. After Emily, I wasn't sure that someone could fill the void she left, not only for Andrew, but also for Ethan and me. That night, Victoria appeared. She entered my house with an elegant light blue dress. Her hair perfectly styled in waves that framed her face, and lips painted a soft red that curved into a smile. That smile, I must admit, was charming, as if she had rehearsed it to please anyone. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Joseph," she said with a sweet voice, bowing her head slightly. I returned the smile, invited her in, and served her a cup of hot and aromatic coffee. "How cozy your house is," said Victoria, while her eyes toward the family photos hanging on the wall, where there was one of Emily hugging a very small Ethan. I nodded and thanked her, but her eyes stopped on that photo longer than I would have liked, and I wasn't sure if I liked that. Dinner proceeded in an atmosphere I tried to make as friendly as possible. I put on the table the dishes I had prepared all afternoon: burgers wrapped in sesame buns, a plate of mac and cheese with cheese sauce, and a fresh salad with apple, Ethan's favorite dish. Andrew sat next to Victoria without taking his eyes off her. Happiness was noticeable in every gesture. "Dad, Victoria works in marketing at my company. She's very good at what she does," he said with a voice full of pride. Victoria smiled. She served herself some mac and cheese with a delicate but calculated movement. "Mr. Joseph, this is delicious. You have to teach me how to prepare it," she said, giving me a friendly look. I smiled and responded with courtesy, but a small part of me remained uneasy. There was something in her way of talking, in her way of laughing, that made me feel like I was watching a very well-mounted theater play. Ethan, my grandson, was sitting at the head of the table, strangely quiet. He, who normally didn't stop telling things about school that night, only stepped on his food without lifting his head even once. I noticed he avoided Victoria's gaze as if trying to hide in a safe corner. Victoria leaned over, took a chocolate bar from her purse, and put it in front of him. "Ethan," with a radiant smile, "this is for you. It's very tasty," she said with a voice as sweet as if she were trying to win him over. But Ethan remained still, his little hands gripping the cutlery, and then simply turned his face without touching the chocolate. I saw a flash of fear in his eyes and felt as if my heart would shrink. Andrew frowned, about to scold his son. "Ethan, what's wrong with you? Victoria is giving you candy." I quickly intervened. "Nothing's wrong. He's probably just a little tired. Leave him alone, son." Andrew sighed, but said nothing more and turned to serve more wine to Victoria, as if he wanted to lighten the atmosphere. Olivia, my adoptive daughter, was also at dinner. She sat across from me, eating in silence. but I noticed how her gaze darkened when Victoria took Andrew's hand under the table. Olivia has always been a very sensitive girl, and I know she loves Andrew like a brother. But sometimes I wonder if that feeling isn't deeper. When Victoria took Andrew's hand, Olivia's hand stopped over her glass, and I saw how her fingers tightened a little. She didn't say anything, just lowered her head and continued eating. But that silence was heavier than any word. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to understand what saddened her, but I knew it wasn't the time. After dinner, Victoria insisted on washing the dishes, although I refused several times. "Mr. Joseph, let me do it. You rest," she said with overflowing enthusiasm. I reluctantly accepted and watched her enter the kitchen, roll up her sleeves, and hum a cheerful melody while cleaning. I must admit, she did everything impeccably. The dishes were orderly, and the sink was gleaming. For a moment, I came to think, this girl seems very attentive. But then, when I went out to the living room, I saw Ethan sitting, coloring with his little hands, clutching a colored pencil. Victoria approached and sat next to him, praising him. "How beautifully you draw, Ethan. What is it? Let's see. Let me see." But Ethan dropped the pencil immediately and leaned back with an expression of distrust, as if she were a threat. Victoria looked at me sideways and quickly forced a smile, as if to disguise the awkward moment. "What a shy boy," she said with the same sweet voice, but I saw something strange shine in her gaze. Andrew, meanwhile, didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. He was busy serving more wine, telling funny anecdotes from work, and laughing out loud every time Victoria made a joke. The introduction ended with my son completely satisfied, saying goodbye to Victoria at the door, with his gaze fixed on her, as if there was no one else in the world. I stayed there watching them walk away with a strange feeling in my heart, as if something wasn't quite right. Time passed, and Victoria gradually became part of our lives. One weekend morning, with the radiant sun of Massachusetts flooding the living room through the windows, I was knitting a scarf when Victoria appeared smiling from ear to ear. "Mr. Joseph, today I want to take Ethan to the park. Is that okay with you?" she asked with a voice full of enthusiasm. I looked at Ethan, who was on the floor playing with his wooden blocks with an expressionless face. "Of course, I'm sure he'll love it," I responded, forcing a smile, although I felt a small doubt inside me. Andrew had gone to work, and I thought maybe a little fresh air would do Ethan good. Victoria took Ethan by the hand and led him toward the door while I watched them leave with a strange heaviness in my heart. When they returned, Victoria entered with a triumphant smile. "He had so much fun. He didn't stop going up the slide and even asked for another ice cream," she recounted with a voice full of emotion. But when I looked at Ethan, I saw that his shirt was dirty with some dried dirt stains on the blue fabric that I had ironed that morning. He was silent with his toy car in his hand, without saying a word about his outing. "Shh, did you have fun, my boy?" I asked him, bending down to stroke his hair. He just nodded slightly, looking away. I wanted to ask him more, to know why he was so quiet. But Victoria intervened with her always sweet voice. "I already told you, Mr. Joseph. He loved it." I nodded, but inside me a small piece of the doubt puzzle began to form. On another occasion, while Andrew was at work, Victoria appeared as a surprise. I was in the kitchen preparing scrambled eggs for lunch, when I heard her talking to Ethan in the living room. At first her voice was soft, but suddenly I heard a harsh phrase. "Stay still, Ethan. Don't make a mess. You're already big and you're still acting like a little boy. I stopped dead with my hands still over the onion I was chopping, and a cold ran through my body. I came out of the kitchen, and instantly Victoria changed her tone, becoming as sweet as if nothing had happened. How smart our Ethan is. Look what a tall tower he built. She pointed to the wooden blocks the boy was playing with a radiant smile. But Ethan just pressed his lips and looked at me as if asking for help. I tried to smile and said, "Yes, he's very skillful." But inside, the unease began to grow like a small thorn digging into my heart. I calmed myself. She's probably not used to children. Anyone is a bit clumsy at first. Ethan's 6th birthday is a memory I will never forget. Olivia, my adoptive daughter, spent the whole morning baking a chocolate cake, Ethan's favorite. When she arrived with the cake and put it on the table with its lit candles, Ethan screamed with joy. His eyes shone for the first time in months. "Aunt Olivia, this is my favorite cake," he exclaimed, running to hug her. She smiled, stroked his hair, and told him tenderly, "I made it for you, my love. Eat a lot." I watched them with a warm heart, feeling that the family flame was lighting up again. Victoria was also there, but only applauded in a forced way, standing in a corner with a lackluster smile. Her only gift for Ethan was an indifferent pat on the shoulder and a happy birthday. Champ. I saw how Ethan shrank a little, avoiding her gaze, and my heart hurt again. I wanted to say something, but I remained silent, telling myself I shouldn't interfere too much. Another time, Andrew took Victoria and Ethan to the supermarket. I stayed home, but when they returned, I heard Victoria complaining with an irritated tone. Ethan knocked over a whole bag of candy at the checkout, and I had to pay for it. What a clumsy boy. Andrew frowned and turned to scold his son. "Ethan, you're already big. You have to be more careful." I saw Ethan lower his head with his little hands intertwined, and his gaze sought mine as if asking for help. I approached quickly and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, my boy. They were just some candies." But inside, I couldn't stop wondering why Victoria got angry so easily with a child. Why couldn't she be more tender like Emily was? One afternoon when I went to pick up Ethan from school, his teacher took me to a corner and told me in a low but worried voice, "Mr. Joseph, lately Ethan talks less and seems very withdrawn. Is something happening at home?" I froze but tried to downplay it. "Probably it's because of the changes. Teacher, don't worry." But on the way home, Ethan pulled my shirt and told me with a trembling voice, "Grandpa, I don't want to go home with Miss Victoria." I stopped and bent down to look into his clear eyes, feeling my heart shrink. "Why do you say that? My love, Miss Victoria loves you," I told him, but as soon as I said it, I knew I was wrong. Ethan shook his head with firm determination in his gaze. "No, Grandpa, she doesn't love me." I stroked his hair, trying to calm him, but inside I couldn't deny that the boy was telling the truth. Olivia, who was nearby, had heard everything. She turned around silently, but I saw how her shoulders moved slightly, as if containing a sigh. All those loose pieces, all those small signs, I had seen them, but had chosen to ignore them, and so came the day of my son's wedding. That afternoon, the golden sun of Massachusetts filtered through the large windows, bathing the hall with resplendent light, as if it wanted to celebrate my son's happy day. I was sitting at table number 5 next to my grandson Ethan and Olivia, my adoptive daughter. Ethan was playing with his red car, whispering a soft vroom, vroom. I looked at him and my heart filled with tenderness. Olivia, with a simple beige dress, was sitting on the other side, leaning from time to say something in Ethan's ear with a smile as sweet as the morning sun. "My boy, eat another little piece of bread," she told him, breaking off a little piece. I smiled seeing them, feeling a bit of comfort in my heart. Although our family had gone through so much pain, Olivia and Ethan's presence was always the fire that warmed my soul. Andrew, my son, dressed in an elegant dark blue suit, walked among the tables toasting with relatives. His face overflowed with happiness. His radiant smile seemed to want to erase the dark years that followed Emily's death. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. I wanted to believe he had found new happiness, that Victoria, the dazzling bride with her wedding dress embroidered with beadwork, would give him a new home. But every time my gaze crossed with Victoria's, who laughed out loud in front of the cameras without letting go of her wine glass, I felt a small thorn digging into my heart. Her smile was too perfect, like a carefully placed mask. The soft melody of the jazz band played mixing with the lively conversations of the guests. The waiters moved with discretion, serving appetizers, crispy crackers, aromatic clam chowder, and fresh seafood dishes elegantly decorated. I noticed that Ethan only took one cracker and then carefully pushed away the seafood plate. I frowned and asked him quietly, "Don't you like this, my love?" The boy shook his head, looking away as if hiding something. I wanted to ask him more, but a close relative interrupted, saying cheerfully, "Ethan behaves well, Joseph. Look how big he is." I smiled and responded, "He's already quite a very smart little man." But inside, I couldn't help worrying. Ethan had never rejected food in such a strange way. In the distance, I saw that Victoria's gaze was directed at our table. The smile on her lips seemed to tense for a second, just enough for no one to notice before she turned around to continue toasting with another guest. I tried to dismiss my unease, telling myself I was thinking too much. But then everything changed in an instant. Ethan continued playing with his little car. He pushed it too hard, and the toy rolled to the floor. The boy quickly bent down to pick it up, but I saw him remain still, with very wide eyes fixed on something under the table. I leaned over to ask him what was wrong, when Ethan pulled out a little paper folded in 4 with trembling hands and pale face. Immediately he clung to my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandpa, let's go, please. Let's go now." My heart began to beat hard, as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. "What's wrong, my boy?" I asked, trying to stay calm, but Ethan's panicked look prevented me from doing so. Trembling, he repeated that question that froze my blood. "You haven't seen under the table, have you?" His words were like a cold knife that paralyzed me. I bent down, lifted the white tablecloth, and my sight toured the dark space under the table. The little paper was thrown next to Ethan's chair, a harmless but threatening object. I picked it up with trembling hands, feeling the world shrink around me, leaving only Ethan, me, and that damn paper. I unfolded it. The candlelight was enough to read the scribbled words. "Table 5, add shrimp to the boy's portion." A few words, but they were like an electric shock that ran through my whole body. My stomach, the blood, unconsciously. I crumpled the paper in my hand. The music, the laughter, Everything around me seemed to sink into an abyss from which I couldn't escape. Victoria, with her dazzling wedding dress, continued laughing in a corner of the hall, raising her glass to toast with a guest, as if nothing in the world could worry her. Andrew was busy taking photos with his co-workers, with a radiant smile that seemed to confirm that this was the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that hall was a farce, a curtain that hid the terrible truth I had just discovered. I squeezed the paper hard, feeling it burn my skin. Ethan, the grandson I loved more than my own life, had almost become the victim of an evil plan. Right on his father's wedding day, I turned toward Olivia, my adoptive daughter, who was sitting next to Ethan. Her eyes were full of concern seeing my expression. "Take care of Ethan, please," I told her, trying to stay calm, although I knew I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. Olivia nodded, drawing Ethan toward her and hugging him tightly like a protective shield. "Where are you going?" she asked me quietly, but full of anguish. I just shook my head without responding because I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I quickly went out to the hallway with heavy legs, as if they carried lead, but with my heart beating wildly, urging me to act. Near the bar, I saw a group of waiters chatting. Their laughter sounded like a painful contrast to the storm that was unleashing inside me. I recognized Ryan, the young man who had brought food to our table several times. He had a kind face and a friendly smile, but at that moment I had no head to think about that. I approached him directly, put the paper in his face, and asked him with a firm voice, "Do you know who sent this paper?" Ryan looked at the paper, and his face changed instantly. His carefree smile became an expression of panic. "My God, this is my paper," he stammered with trembling hands, as if wanting to snatch it from me. "A girl gave it to me, and I dropped it accidentally when I was carrying the tray." His words were like a ray of light in the middle of confusion. But they also disturbed me even more. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, almost shouting, completely losing my calm. Ryan stepped back, confused. "I don't know her name, sir. She just told me to give it to the chef. The paper didn't say who sent it." The rage exploded inside me like a fire that burned all reason. I approached closer with my voice trembling with anger and fear. "You know my grandson is severely allergic to shrimp. A single piece could kill him." Ryan turned pale with eyes wide open with horror and shook his head frantically. "Sir, I really didn't know. I just followed the note. I had no idea about anything." His voice broke as if he too was trapped in this nightmare. The other waiters began to murmur among themselves, looking at each other with curiosity and concern. I squeezed the paper in my hand, feeling it burn my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything, but I knew I couldn't let emotions dominate me. Ethan was waiting for me, and I had to protect him. From inside the hall, the master of ceremonies' voice cheerfully announced to prepare for the main course. His voice was like a cruel reminder that time was running out, and if I hesitated, a deadly trap could be waiting for Ethan. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremors in my body. I knew I couldn't stay silent. If I didn't act right now, I would never forgive myself. I returned to the hall with the paper still in my hand, like irrefutable proof of a sinister plan. The hall continued flooded by candlelight, and the jazz band's music mixed with the guests' laughter. The waiters silently served the main dishes, and the aroma of grilled steak and mashed potatoes filled the air. But for me, everything was a farce. I looked at Ethan huddled next to Olivia with his clear eyes full of fear fixed on me as if I were his only refuge in the middle of the storm. I took Ethan's little hand, feeling his trembling fingers in my palm. And then, as if driven by an invisible force, I stood up suddenly. My voice resonated clear and firm above the music and conversations. "One moment, please. Before we start eating, I have something to clarify." The whole hall fell silent, as if time had stopped. All gazes were fixed on table 5, where I was standing with Ethan at my side, and Olivia sitting with a spark of determination in her eyes. The clinking of glasses ceased, the murmurs faded, and only the beating of my heart in my chest could be heard. I raised the paper. The words scribbled on it were an undeniable accusation. "Who wrote this paper asking for shrimp to be added to the boys' food at table 5? I asked, with my voice trembling with indignation, but striving to keep it clear and cutting. Whispers began to be heard like small waves in a calm lake. Some guests looked at each other, shaking their heads with looks of curiosity and confusion. I felt Ethan's gaze fixed on me, as if he begged me to do something to protect him. Andrew ran from another table with a smile on his face that quickly turned to concern. Seeing my expression, "Dad, what's wrong?" he asked, completely bewildered. I didn't respond immediately. I just put the paper on the table and pushed it toward him. "Read it yourself," I told him with a hard voice, although inside I was a mess. Andrew took the paper, his eyes toward the words, and I saw how his face paled and his hands trembled slightly. "What does this mean?" he asked, stunned, looking at me and then at Ethan as if seeking a logical explanation. Victoria, with her dazzling wedding dress, approached, frowning with perfectly acted surprise. "What is all this, some joke in bad taste?" she said with a soft voice. But I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. I looked directly into her eyes with my heart shrunk by rage and fear. "My grandson is allergic to shrimp," I said, with my voice trembling with indignation. "This is not a joke. This is an attempted murder." My words fell like thunder, plunging the hall into sepulchral silence. Some guests opened their mouths in astonishment, while others began to whisper, their gazes moving from me toward Victoria. Victoria let out a forced laugh, a mask to maintain composure. "Excuse me, Mr. Joseph, but there's no name on the paper. Are you going to believe the story a child who found it invented?" she said with a mocking tone, trying to make me seem like a paranoid old man. Some guests began to comment doubtfully. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Who would do something like this at a wedding?" The blood boiled in my veins. Victoria's audacity left me almost speechless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear off that wedding dress to reveal the truth. But I knew I had to stay calm for Ethan, for my family. Suddenly, Olivia stood up, hugging Ethan tightly with reddened eyes fixed on Victoria. "Enough, Victoria." Her voice sounded cold, but full of pain, unable to contain herself anymore. Olivia approached and gave her a slap that resonated throughout the hall. The dry and resounding sound broke the silence and falsehood. Everyone was stunned, including me. Victoria put her hand to her cheek with eyes wide with surprise, and then turned to Andrew, sobbing. "You see, she's crazy with jealousy, and that's why she attacks me. What have I done to deserve this?" Olivia didn't back down with clenched fists and voice broken by rage. "The only evil one here is you. You wanted to hurt an innocent child at your own wedding." Her words were like a knife that cut the heavy air in the hall. The doubtful gazes began to focus on Victoria, and I saw how she remained paralyzed, her false smile fading. Andrew was motionless. His gaze went from me to Olivia and Victoria, as if he were trapped between two worlds. "Olivia, calm down," he said with a trembling voice. But I knew he was no longer sure who to believe. The guests' murmurs grew like a tide that dragged all gazes toward me, toward Victoria and toward Ethan, my little grandson, who trembled in Olivia's arms. Victoria tried to maintain her false calm, but I saw how her hands trembled when she spoke. "This is slander. Someone probably put that paper to ruin our wedding." Her voice was high-pitched, but I noticed the panic in her gaze, as if her perfect mask was beginning to crack. I couldn't stand her audacity anymore. The anger inside me exploded like a fire that consumed all my patience. I hit the table hard, making the glasses tremble. "Enough!" I shouted, with a voice so cold it silenced even the jazz band's music. "Ryan, come here." The young waiter Ryan approached from a corner with a pale face of fear. His eyes moved from side to side, as if he were trapped between the truth and the approaching storm. I showed him the paper with a trembling but firm voice. "Confirm it. Is this the paper you received?" Ryan nodded repeatedly, stammering. "Yes, sir, that's it. A girl from another table gave it to me, and I dropped it accidentally when I was carrying the tray." He lowered his head, as if wanting to avoid my gaze. I felt the blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm because I knew everyone in the hall was watching. Victoria hurried to interrupt with a high-pitched, almost desperate voice. "He's mistaken. I don't know anything about that." But before I could respond, a weak but pain-filled voice was heard from behind. Isabella, Victoria's sister, burst into tears and stood up from her chair. "It wasn't my sister Victoria who gave me that paper," said the young woman, trembling while tears ran down her cheeks. "She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I didn't know what it said inside." A murmur of amazement ran through the hall. "My God, I can't believe it. How is it possible?" I looked at Isabella, and my heart softened. She was barely 18 years old. Her eyes were red and full of confusion, as if she too was trapped in this nightmare. Victoria turned sharply and yelled at her sister with her face disfigured by anger. "Shut up, Isabella. Do you dare invent lies to harm your own sister?" Her voice was cutting, but I saw how her lips trembled, as if she was struggling to hide the truth. Isabella stepped back, trembling from head to toe, and said between sobs, "I'm not lying, sister. I just did what you asked me to." Her words were like a dagger that pierced Victoria's falsehood, leaving the whole hall in a state of shock. A close, elderly relative shook his head with a broken voice. "How is it possible not to forgive even an innocent child?" In the middle of the chaos, Olivia stepped forward, hugging Ethan tightly, and said with an icy voice, "If you keep denying it, we can ask them to check the hall's security cameras. Everything will be clarified in a moment." Her words were like a stone thrown into a lake, causing waves of panic. Victoria's face turned ashen. Her lips tightened, and her gaze desperately sought an escape. But there was no escape anymore. She didn't say another word, and that silence for me was the clearest confession of all. Andrew remained paralyzed with a trembling hand on Ethan's shoulder, looking with horror at the woman he had just called his wife. "Victoria!" His voice broke as if trying to cling to the hope that everything was a misunderstanding. But his gaze, when passing from the paper to Ethan, said it all. I saw how his heart broke, just like mine had broken when discovering the plan. An uncle stood up and shook his head. disgusted. It's incredible. Such evil on a day of celebration. His voice trembled as if containing his indignation. After Olivia's challenge about the security cameras, a mortal silence took over the hall. Victoria, the woman I once tried to accept as part of my family, stood there with a pale face and tight lips, seeking a last excuse. But the truth was exposed, and she had nowhere to run. Andrew, my son, slowly walked toward her with a tense face and red eyes, and asked her, "Victoria, tell me the truth. Is it true?" His voice trembled, as if he begged for a hint of hope that everything was an error. But I knew that deep down he also felt the painful truth. Victoria stepped back, trying to force a twisted smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. "Don't you believe me?" she said with a broken voice, as if trying to cling to the last drop of Andrew's confidence. "This is all a plan of theirs. I didn't do anything." But her words sounded weak, like a wind about to be extinguished before a storm. I looked at her with my heart oppressed by indignation and pain. This woman I thought would bring happiness to my son now stood before me like a stranger, a danger I hadn't seen before. Olivia, my adoptive daughter, put a hand on Andrew's shoulder and said with a voice contained to the maximum, "Ethan almost died because of this woman." Her words were sharp as a razor. Victoria screamed desperately, "Shut up, you're just an intruder." Jealous, but Olivia didn't move. She trembled with rage, but remained firm like a shield for Ethan. "Do you dare call me jealous?" Olivia responded with an icy voice. "Look into this child's eyes and tell me you didn't try to hurt him." Ethan clung to me, his little hand squeezing mine as if he feared being dragged by that nightmare. The guests began to stand up. The party atmosphere had been completely broken. A relative of our family, Mr. John, hit the table with rage. "This is a shame. We can't let this pass." Murmurs of support were heard like waves that grew and sank Victoria in everyone's contemptuous gazes. Andrew, trapped between truth and love, shouted with a voice broken by pain and indignation, "Ethan is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words were like a direct stab to Victoria's heart, and I saw her break into tears. But those tears, I knew, were not of repentance, but of being discovered. I put the paper on the table and declared with a firm voice, "Whoever tries to hurt my grandson will never have the right to set foot in this family." My words resonated clear and inflexible like a sentence. Victoria looked up with eyes full of fire, but I saw defeat in her gaze. She had lost not only against me, but against the truth. The hotel security staff approached and courteously but firmly asked Victoria to leave the hall. "Miss, please come with us," said one of them with a cold voice. Victoria stepped back, seeking help with her gaze, but no one sided with her. Many guests shook their heads, leaving their glasses half drunk and sighed with resignation. "Incredible," whispered one. "How can someone be so cruel?" said another, horrified. Andrew remained motionless with his hands on his head, as if trying to prevent his world from collapsing. Then, as if he no longer had strength to hold himself up, he slowly knelt in front of Ethan with a choked voice. "Son, forgive me. Forgive me, my boy, for not protecting you." I saw tears run down his cheeks and felt my heart split in two. I helped Andrew stand up, squeezing his shoulders, and told him with a grave but sure voice, "Fortunately, we stopped in time. This false happiness has to end here and now." I looked at Victoria, who was being escorted among contemptuous gazes, and in my heart, I knew she never was and never would be part of this family. The days that followed that nightmare wedding, my family was enveloped in a silent whirlwind, where wounds still bled and unanswered questions floated in the air. I felt as if I had just awakened from a nightmare in which I almost lost Ethan, my grandson, whom I love more than my own life. The story of the failed wedding spread everywhere, from the small streets of the suburbs to the conversations of distant relatives. The house phone didn't stop ringing. Some blamed Andrew for having blindly trusted Victoria. Others pitied Ethan, the innocent child who was almost the victim of an evil plan. But for me, each call was just a painful reminder of what we had lived through. Andrew shut himself in after what happened. He was no longer the radiant man with the dark blue suit from the wedding day. Instead, he took Ethan to and from school in silence each day, with his gaze loaded with pain and guilt. Victoria's name, like a curse, was never mentioned in the house again. I looked at Andrew with a hurting heart, but I knew he needed time to heal, to find himself after being betrayed by the person he loved. I didn't blame him because I understand that love can blind people, but I also knew our family had to rise from the ashes. I continued caring for Ethan as I had done since Emily left. I cooked his favorite dishes like pancakes with maple syrup or a soft apple pie, trying to give him back the feeling of security. But who really healed Ethan's soul? It wasn't me, but Olivia, my adoptive daughter. Every morning she carefully prepared his lunch for school, carefully choosing foods without shrimp or anything that could put him in danger. She even wrote a little note for the teacher explaining Ethan's allergy, along with a smiley face drawn with a colored pencil that he loved. "Aunt Olivia, how beautifully you draw," Ethan exclaimed when opening his lunchbox, and I saw how his eyes lit up, as if a part of his innocence had returned. Every afternoon, Olivia took Ethan to the nearby park. I used to watch them from afar, seeing how she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would fly high. Once Ethan fell from the slide, and Olivia ran toward him, lifted him up, dusted off his clothes, and whispered to him, "Nothing happened, my love, I'm here." Ethan's clear laughter resonated, a sound I thought I had lost forever, and that now was like a balm for my heart. I looked at Olivia with infinite gratitude, because she was not only a sister to him, but also like a second mother, filling the void that Emily had left. One night, when Ethan got a high fever, I saw Olivia spend the night awake at his side. She sat in a chair next to the bed, putting wet cloths on his forehead, while she told him quietly the story of a brave sparrow that flew through a storm. I stayed at the door, watching in silence, and I realized that Andrew's gaze followed Olivia for a long time. It was a complex gaze full of gratitude and remorse, as if he were realizing something he had ignored for a long time. I didn't say anything. I simply withdrew in silence, giving him his space. But in my heart, I began to have hope that maybe there was a light at the end of our family's dark tunnel. One night, during one of the rare dinners, when we were all together, sitting around the table with the hot chili I had prepared, Ethan suddenly looked up with his clear eyes fixed on Olivia. "I want Aunt Olivia to be my mommy," he said with a soft but clear voice, as if it was something he had been thinking about for a long time. Everyone at the table fell silent. Olivia blushed and lowered her head, gripping the spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. Andrew remained paralyzed with teary eyes, as if Ethan's words had touched a very deep fiber in his heart. I smiled. I put my hand on Andrew's shoulder and told him with a warm voice, "True happiness, son, doesn't come from a dazzling wedding dress. but from a sincere heart that knows how to love. Andrew looked at me, then looked at Olivia, and I saw a small spark of hope shine in his eyes. Time passed, and Victoria completely disappeared from our lives like a toxic wind that had gone. Ethan became a happy child again, always attached to Olivia with his red car and the drawings he made for her. I watched him run and play in the yard, feeling great relief, but also a pang of pain, thinking about everything he had had to go through. One day, Andrew took Olivia's hand. Suddenly, he stood in front of me in the living room and said with a trembling but firm voice, "Dad, I know I was wrong. I was blind. I put Ethan in danger. But this time, I don't want to let the person who has really been by our family side pass by." Olivia lowered her head with blushed cheeks, but I saw a radiant smile on her lips. I nodded, while tears silently rolled down my cheeks. "Son, all I want is for you and Ethan to be happy," I told him with a broken voice. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon that spread over the quiet street. Its soft light was like a reminder that although our family had gone through dark days, light always finds a way to break through. I whispered to myself, family isn't always made of blood ties. Sometimes it's chosen with love and courage. After that dark wedding, a new chapter full of light had really begun for my family. I looked toward the yard where the kite that Olivia and Ethan had flown the day before was still there. And I knew that although old wounds might never heal completely, we would continue forward together with love and strength as our support. After going through all this, I understood something very important. In life, there are losses that cannot be replaced, betrayals that break the heart, but sincere love will always be the light that illuminates the path. Family isn't only built with blood ties, but also with choices, with the courage to protect each other from darkness and danger. It's sacrifice and true affection that brings lasting happiness, not false appearances. I want everyone to remember that we must listen. We must let the heart guide us, because sometimes a small gesture of attention can save a life. And it's kindness that takes us out of nights that seem to have no end. The story you just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to reflect. How many fathers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I really wonder if you were in my place. What would you have done? Would you have chosen silence to maintain peace? Or would you have dared to face everything? To recover your own voice, I'd like to know your opinion, because each story can become a candle that illuminates the path of others. God always blesses us, and I'm sure that courage will lead us to better days. If you like this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.